Hi, my name is Alex Chang, and I'm a TF for CSE 75, Building Dynamic Websites, and we'll start our section for today. So today we'll go over, briefly go over again on PHP and on session start, and then later on we're going to talk about XML. Okay. So I guess to start off, we can, instead of just me talking, we can look at an example of logging in. So this home.php file, if I open up, it will say you are not logged in. If we look at the source code for that, we see that on top here there's a session start. So that's something that you should include if you want the pages to remember the person or the account of the person. And at the bottom here, it says this is the part, the PHP part that says if $_session equals authenticated, then it'll display you're logged in. But as of now, this $session authenticated is not set to be true. So that's why we see this else part, else you're not logged in, on this home.php page. So let's see. Let's go ahead and click on version 1. Let me make this bigger. And login 1.php says, so again, the session _start is starting the session. And here since we don't have a database yet, we're just defining the user to be jharvard and the password to be crimson. So let me input those in here. jharvard, password as crimson, login. And then now it says you are logged in because the $session authenticated is now set as true. If we go here, this is the part that says if the username and passwords are both set, and if these values are the values that we wanted, in this case jharvard and crimson, then remember the user's login. So $session authenticated, here we're setting that value to be true. And then after that, we're redirecting from login1.php to, in this case, home.php. So that's the location of our the page that we want to redirect to. And that's how we get back to home.php. Any questions on this?
Could I just see that statement where there was a variable called home path?
Yeah.
Host path.
Host path.
So that PHP will specify the directory for you? Is that a full directory that's going into there? Or?
Well, in this case, it's over here we're setting this variable host to $server.
Right there.
Yeah. Oops. Where are we? So over here, the other way is to type in cs75.net/home.php or lecture/2/source/home.php. But this way, we're dynamically generating
it's
these.
Weird to me because just so many what I think of as reserved words show up.
Yeah. So these are variables that are being created. Okay. So let's take a look at yeah.
Is the PHPS just for readability for us to be able to see the code? Is that the only function it's serving?
Yeah. So the reason why over here in the source page there are home.php and home.phps is that the home.php is the page, the actual PHP file where we see the actual web page, and then the home.phps is the page where we get to see the sources, because in a PHP page, in a HTML page, if you right click and select view page source, you can see the HTML code. But in a PHP page, the pages, the information, the PHP code that we want to see are not displayed in the source. So that's why there's a PHPS. Other questions? Okay. So let's see. So now that we're, where are we? Now that we're logged in, let's take a look at logout. So logout.php is the page I will get to later. Actually, let me go ahead and click this logged out button. So after I click that, it says you are logged out. So what happened there? Let's take a look. So again, the session underscore start is just something to keep on the PHP page. And then here we're setting the cookie for username and password to time minus 3,600. And this is just a convention to make the cookie expire by setting the expiration time to sometime in the past, so that and over here, so that the session will forget about this cookie, because that's where it's remembering the user information. And then the last line, session destroy, will destroy this session that was started before. OK? Any questions?
Does this apply to our project somehow?
No. So for this project, you guys don't have to create an account. You don't have to create an account. So all you need is to create a page, a website that allows the user to buy items off the menu. But you don't. The customer doesn't have to create like a customer account and then password and everything. Those are not needed for this.
Do we need to deal with session start or anything like that?
Session start.
You want to store cookies, right?
Yeah.
Isn't the owner of the restaurant supposed to be able to update the menus when you want?
Yeah. So instead of creating a username and a password, in this case, I guess you want to remember the items that are bought, along with like the price and everything that's on the menu. You want to carry that from the menu selection page all the way to the checkout page. So you can use session start as a way to remember those information. Yeah.
You do use session start?
Yeah. Yeah.
Session start is just like a class that will hold like a Boolean value of true or false in it?
No. So session start doesn't hold a Boolean value. It remembers the cookie that has the user information in it.
Okay. So how many values or how many sessions can you start? Because obviously someone may want to order more than one item.
Uh-huh.
So can session start be like an array, or how does that work?
So session start, so remember that cookie is just a very long string.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yep.
as you increase your bought item from 1 to 2, it doesn't create 2 cookies. It just stores both of these information into one cookie.
So you just have a string that represents multiple items, and you have to search the string to figure out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So since we talked about menus and sort of prompts at project 1, let's talk a little bit about XML. So as a review, XML file looks like this. Oops, looks like this. There's a root element. So all these tags, in this case, all these capitalized tags, these are elements. And the element at the very top that encapsulates everything is the root element. So in this case, the root element is order. And then inside you have different kinds of tags. Sold to, sold on, item, book, price, person, all these. So when you're creating this XML, you can think of it as like a tree where there's a root element order on the very top. And then there are these children or descendants of this order, sold to, sold on, item. And then there are descendants of sold to, and then descendants of item and book, and all these tags. So XML is very useful because it allows the user to create these tags. So it allows the user to create tags that are meaningful for human readability. So these order, these sold to person, these are not something that comes with the server. These are just whatever the user think is useful for someone to read and understand what this XML code is. And let's see. So one good thing about XML is its extensibility. So when you have a original structure of the XML, a good thing about XML is you can insert other tags and other attributes to this XML without breaking the existing data. So in this case, we originally have everything except, well, we originally do not have this block here in the middle. But let's say for some reason later on we wanted to include the person's middle name, initial, and address, and other information. We can just stick these information into this XML file, and that allows it makes the user really easy to add and take out information from the XML page. Yes.
So when would one use the text? You know, like looking at last name, we just have Malin.
Uh-huh.
I mean, so that Malin is just a piece of text. Is it also okay to say the last name equals Malin? So you have a value and an attribute? I mean, what's the difference? When would one choose one over the other?
Let's see. So you would call them, well, first of all, you'll call them differently. With it being an attribute, like ID equals 1, 2, 3.
Right.
In this case, you will later on when you're calling them, you'll say, let's see, you'll call the element, and then in square brackets and double quotation marks ID.
Yeah, I understand that they're accessed differently, but why use one of it? Why wouldn't one just use value attributes all the way through?
This can just be a design decision.
Okay.
So let's say is one way is you can distinguish. I guess to me it's more logical to make the person ID to be one kind of tag, and then these like the person's information by using sort of this like text values.
Okay, it seems like it could be done other way, and I was just curious if there's an advantage or a disadvantage.
There isn't really a advantage or disadvantage between the two.
Just more typing to.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little more typing.
Mm-hmm.
I think we talked about it in class, and there were a couple of reasons. Isn't there something about an attribute, you can only have one per page or something like that? Like that ID? I made notes, 'cause we did talk about it.
Okay. For this, I would go back to the lecture video and review that because I'm not 100% sure I guess when to use one and over the other.
Do you happen to have the lecture PHP on you?
The lecture videos.
Not the video, the file that he used.
This is the.
The one from class.
Name.
He kept renaming it though, so maybe it wouldn't be good for him to try to
Yeah.
track it down.
Okay. Yeah, it's not in the PDF file.
He did say you can't extend it if you're using it as an attribute, so you can't put like nest another element underneath it unless you make something an attribute.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Right.
Do you get
So.
that? 'Cause I think that's the main thing.
Yeah. So just to repeat that, if you put it as an attribute, like this case, ID equals 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
you can't put in things under. You can't put extra tags underneath this. Whereas in this case, if you have an address tag, you can put street name, street number, city, and state tags underneath the address tag. Does that make sense?
No.
Well, in your example, last name isn't something you break further down, but address is an example.
Well,
Yeah.
you're right, I mean, last name, it's harmless, because you're not gonna put anything underneath it unless somebody has 4 last names.
Well, true, but in this case, last name is the same type of field for where you would put in first the address. So say on a customer order form, you would probably put last name, first name, along with where you would put address on that same form.
I have a line here from the internet. Yeah, I don't know if it helps, but it says elements describe data, whereas attributes are like properties of an element. And if they provide further definition about the elements, the way that properties describe characteristics of objects and classes. I think it's kind of what you're saying, but.
Okay.
So to use them, if you feel like you don't need to add things below it, then you can use it as an attribute.
And it doesn't matter.
It doesn't. Otherwise the two things don't
Yeah, I could see
really
that,
matter.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. And let's see.
In that example, last name and first name are not considered below person?
They are considered below person.
Oh, but nothing below that can exist?
Nothing below which one?
Below last name and first name?
It can. So maybe, let's see, under what condition? Maybe you want to add like a junior or a senior into the last name. Then in between, on the line after last name, you can put in a tag said, what would you call it? Suffix, and make that, junior or senior or something.
The third or the fourth.
Yeah. But otherwise, I mean, in this case, you can use, you can put Malin and David into as attributes, but then you wouldn't be able to do this thing to an address. So again, this is a design decision.
So maybe it's good to have an ID because it'll be a unique identifier. So you could change your name potentially, but I would still know that you're 1, 2, 3 no matter what you change your name to.
Sure, yeah. So in this case, the person ID is it's like a good way to remember the person, and then these names are so they can change. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. I figured that we can do an example of an XML and how to parse information from an XML page. So let's see. Let me create XML example.xml. So on the very top of an XML page, it will be the root element or the root tag. So in this case, let's say if we want to create, create a school. So in this XML page, it'll have information about the student and the faculty, for example. So on top, maybe we'll have a school, and then inside school there are students. School. There's students and faculties. Let's say there's a student. I want to give him a first name. Alex. Last In fact, yeah.
Just a simple thing. In this example that you're making, so I could say student and have the attribute Harvard UID equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Would that be a good
Sure.
use of attribute?
Yeah. So maybe here, the question is, can we put an attribute for students? And the answer is yes. Here, maybe we can say HUID for Harvard ID equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can later on refer to this, this student by the student's HUID. Let's create another student. HUID equals 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. First, John. Well, let's use Sid. Except I don't remember his last name.
Too sweet.
Smith.
It's right. So I'll just put a C there for now. Let me close the student. Students, faculties, let's say, 9999. First, David. Malin. And then close professor. There. So here we have a very simple example of an XML page. The root element is school, and then inside there are children's students and faculties, of which there are individual students and the professors of the school. Any questions on this? Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. Chmod 644 XML ex.xml. So chmodding to make this page viewable. And let's take a look. What is it? XML example. There you go. So here is the XML page that I just created. And this is just a display from the browser. And by pressing these minus and plus signs, I can open up and close up these tags. So it's easy to read. And let me go ahead and create XML example.php just very quickly. Title XML example. Close the title. Close the head. Create the body. Let's see. Okay, so I can do put in the pre tag. So on the very top of your PHP page, remember that you have to include this. You have to load this XML file. So XML equals new simple XML element file get file underscore get underscore contents, and then XML underscore x dot XML. I have 1, 2. There. And then in here, let's do print r $XML. Okay. So on the very top, I've loaded this XML page into this PHP file. And over here, I am printing recursively this, this XML file. So let's see. By doing that, .php, I have this. Make it bigger. So what I did was only print out
I'm sorry, what was the code that printed that?
the code to print out XML
Oh, print
recursively
R?
is print
What does that stand for?
print recursively.
Print recursively?
So by doing this, it's going to print out the entire XML variable. The tree, in this case, the array tree. Okay. And we see how these elements of this XML, of this tree, it seems like these objects are, they're stored as an array. So there's elements index 0, index 1, and then there's this other array for the professor. Okay, that's not too interesting. So let's go ahead and do this. So let's take out this. Question mark. For each $XML student as $student. Go student $student arrow name dot has ID number dot $student HUID dot pick. Close that. Okay. So what I have here is I'm saying that for each XML, which is the tree, go into the students tag. So let me open up the page. XML. Okay. So that's my XML page. It says for each XML, the arrow students will go into the students tag, and then the arrow student will go into the student tag inside the students tag. And then I'm storing these students as $student. That's what this first line does. Okay. And then the next line says echo, so print out. In quotes are the actual text that you want to print out. So it said print student dot $student arrow name.
Your username there?
No, you can't. So it would be
First or last?
yeah, first. So let's just put the first name there. Okay. So in the student in the student tag, go to what the first tag is, print out that value, and then has an ID number of. And so here, notice the difference between this student's arrow first and this student's in square brackets HUID. So you would do the square brackets when you have these attributes. And these are attributes. That's the HUID is the attribute name, and then that's the value, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you have these not as attributes, then you would just do the element arrow. You would point to the tag. So in this case, students arrow first should print out Alex. Any questions on this? Okay, so let's see what this does. If successful, I should get that. So let me make that bigger. This student Alex has ID number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and student Siddharth has ID number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So with that echo statement, the dot, is that just a space?
No, so the dot is concatenating between strings and variables. Let me go back to this case. Yep, so in this case it says student space, this is in double quotes. So that means print out the text, the actual text, the way it is. And then this dot says I'm going to add that onto something else, and this something else is the variable $student arrow first. So without the quotes, I'm not going to print out this exact $student arrow first. I'll print out whatever the value is for the variable students arrow first. Okay. Yeah, so quick walkthrough about problem. Oh, yes, and so again, w3schools.com is a very good resource. If you go on there, there's a page that talks about XML, basically everything that you need to know about XML. And it's a great resource if you ever run into trouble on your problem set. So let's, just to wrap up, let's go to projects. Yep, so for this problem set, you would have to create a XML page. One of the things that you have to create is an XML page that stores the menu for 3 aces, pizzas, 3 aces, and then create another website to read this XML page to be able to let the customers buy, put orders online. And again, this XML page is not something that, it's not a web page. It's not like a PHP or HTML page. This is just some kind of data that you want the PHP file to get access from. And the PHP code, along with the HTML code, will print out, those will be the actual page that prints out by taking the style that you store in the CSS file. So hope that relationship is clear. Yep, so for this problem set, you will be creating this page that takes in orders, remember the orders, and remember the order all the way to the very end, and display the total for the price, and then I think say thank you for your order at the very end. And the purpose of having this XML page, instead of putting this inside the HTML or PHP file, is that this way it's really easy for the store owner to update the menu. Instead of having to go into this PHP file and update things inside, they can just use this XML page, which they can open with any kind of text editor, and just go ahead and just go into that page and add or delete or update these tags that you have in the page. And that's the reason why we're using an XML page for this menu instead of just everything in one page. There's a menu here. Yep, so this is the menu for 3 aces. As you can see, it's not as straightforward as we wish to be, because one problem that we'll run into is that there are different prices for the same item. And some item like pizzas, they have 2 prices, whereas these special dinners, for example, they only have 1 price. So perhaps one way to create your XML page is to figure out how you can manage to store two different kinds of prices. Where in this case, the pizza, they have the small and large, and then in the special dinner is just a set price for all dinners. So that's one issue that you have to think of. Yeah.
In the case of something like pizzas, where you have two different prices, a small and a large.
Mm-hmm.
If you were creating the XML for that, for example, and you wanted to have something called prices, did you have two attributes inside of that? Small equals and then large equals? So I've seen some XMLs that they wrap multiple attributes
Mm-hmm.
under the same, so the bracket price, small equals, with the quotes and the number inside of it, then space, large equals with the quotes, and then you end the price.
Uh-huh.
Can you put two attributes on the same line?
Yeah, sure. You can put, so when you have element tag, you can put in, it's not limited to just one attribute. You can have, for example, back in this school example, we can have student HUID equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe class year equals
Right.
2013. So you are allowed to have multiple attributes in this case.
Okay.
Let me go back to menus. Yeah, so one way that you can do, perhaps if you think that if you want to put these prices as your attributes, maybe you would have an attribute name that says small equals 550 for tomato and cheese, and space large equals, in quotes, 975 for the large pizza. But then when you're doing the special dinners, you would be creating, it seems like you'd be creating another name for it because there's no small or large. So that might be confusing and it might be harder for you to code and less intuitive.
Okay.
And so that's the first issue. The second issue is not everything under this pizza section is pizza. So for example, the two-way combo is, there's no flavor called two-way combo. It seems like you get to choose two flavors from the top, and the total price will be $7.95.
We only had to pick 3 from each category, so.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see. But it says on the prompt set, it does say you only need to pick 3 from each category, 3 items. But it does say that because 3 is enough to demonstrate your understanding of how to create these tags. Yeah, or lack of understanding. So. I don't know. I still think it would be good to at least put some thought into how you would create these two-way combos, or if you want to add extra cheese, maybe yeah.
Couldn't you just set it up in like a hierarchy, so it's the same dish type?
Yeah.
And then do it that way, and then the dish type would be under pizza, so
Mhm.
whatever you wanted, that would be an attribute.
Sure.
Be under.
So you mean on the top you would have an attribute for dish type, and then
Which would be like the actual name of whatever you're ordering. It's almost like counterintuitive because it's a smaller item, but it'd be larger. And like the same thing with the Harvard ID. It's identifiable by only one person. This
Yeah.
would be only identifiable by one menu.
by one.
You know what I mean? Like
Not
when,
quite.
When it's basically like you're setting the attribute
Uh-huh.
to be the individual, to set it apart from everything else, and then within that hierarchy of the attribute, you're setting all the parameters of where that attribute belongs.
So you mean it would be
I'm probably making this more complex.
On the
And, like what I'm describing is very simple. Like it's not.
So do you mean one attribute name would be tomato and cheese equals, and then the
Yes,
price?
Exactly.
And then another
under-
attribute would be
underneath
onions.
That would be like menu type pizzas. And
Oh,
maybe those.
sure. Yeah, so
Using the attribute format?
So it would be the menu item itself. But I would assume that you would actually have to do like a small tomato cheese pizza,
Mhm.
and then under that you would say what it belongs to, and
Okay.
just a way of thinking about it.
Yep. So the proposal is to have an attribute called, I guess, a element called dish, and then as the attribute there'll be the first attribute will be tomato and cheese equals, and then you want to equal the price.
But then you would have to.
But then you have
small-
two different kinds of
smaller,
prices.
So wouldn't you have to set the attribute to be more specific?
So you mean like tomato and cheese small equals 550, tomato cheese large equals 975,
Yeah.
and then underneath,
We put it under pizza. So.
underneath you put pizza as a child element of the dish.
Yeah.
That might work. Yeah.
Might.
But it's whichever way you think it's more intuitive for you to
Okay.
create.
So what would be the other way?
So I guess the other way is the way that this menu is listed.
Okay.
So you might have like a, let me see if there are beverages.
Well, do you need to really worry about two prices as opposed to one price? I mean, if you had just, if your categories was pizza,
Mm-hmm.
you know you can have two prices. If your category is dinner, well, in this case, there's spaghetti or ziti, there's not gonna be two prices. It would be its own category.
Sure. But if you want pizza, so if you have an element called pizza and then another element of the same level of hierarchy called special dinners, would your code be able to go in and distinguish if it's a for each item on my menu? I want to go into the tag and go to the price and find out what the price is. Is it going to be able to go into the price, or does the variable name change as you hit some things that have two prices and something that only has one?
Yeah, I mean, I see that, but one could always fudge it too. I mean, one could put 0 down for small or something like that, then you know there's no small.
Uh-huh.
There's only one price.
0.
Well,
Oh,
for example, special dinners, you
Uh-huh.
can still say, again, I'm just shooting from the hip.
Mhm.
You could say, low, the small price is 0 and the max price is $7.25, then you can see that it was a 0, and then you know that there's only one price.
Okay. So, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
I have two things. One, would it be considered so inelegant that we'd be downgraded if we just had small cheese pizza be one instance and large cheese pizza be another without?
So make small pizza as one item, make large pizza as another item?
Would that be so inelegant?
To me, that would be. So I think what would be more intuitive is you would have, I guess, so what this menu is displaying, so like an overall level of pizza or dinner, and then inside pizza there's toppings that you can choose, and inside each topping there's maybe like a radio button for you to choose between large or small for pizza, but these radio buttons are not present for the dinners.
So
Yes.
I have another,
Right.
probably more interesting question.
Okay.
Can you access things by attribute, like search for everything that has an attribute of this name of this and a value of that? Or
Yes.
does it have to be unique?
Attribute names don't have to be.
The attribute values have to be?
No, attribute values don't have to be unique. In this was just an example of attributes. I can say student, maybe as part of this, after HUID equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can add status equals undergrad. In that case, this undergrad status is shared among many students. But I
Can
can.
you show me how you find the undergrads?
How you would find.
I can look at it.
Okay. So to find items in a XML list, you would use use the @ sign, but the actual application I would have to Google it. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions about the P set? Okay. Or this course in general.
I do have a question before I get started on this project.
Uh-huh.
I have a kind of old installation of MAM, and I don't remember the version of PHP, but is there a minimum version of PHP we're supposed to use?
No, there is no minimum version of PHP. Yeah.
Where are we supposed to get the sections like on video on the website? I haven't seen them up there.
I haven't seen that either. Let's see.
Yeah, I've done that, and then it just has the agenda.
All the way at the bottom.
Oh, is it all
Yep.
there?
So if you go to cs75.net/sections, at the bottom there will be a list of the videos and the code that we use in section. So you can go there and take a look.
Thank you.
Yep, and I also upload the simple XML example onto. I'll tell Dan to put it onto this page so you guys can have access to it and take a look whenever you guys want. Yeah.
And then I know it's kind of like talking about water under the bridge, but in Project Zero, what was the expectation for, other than 3 pages, but what were you expecting kind of on the content itself?
The Project Zero was mostly setting up your website, make sure your website works, and then create. The point of creating 3 websites is just so that you have a basic idea of how HTML works, and how to display images, how to create links, how to use tables. I don't think form was a big. I don't think most people use form on Project Zero, but it's just to like an intro to HTML kind of thing. So as long as you follow the guideline that was in the spec, there isn't really much of a better or a worse project, other than I guess the design of your code. So if your code was using some bad style or a bad design, then that might be where points would be taken off.
And what would be like a bad style?
Oh yeah. So one thing I forgot to mention about XML is that the tags can be overlapped. So for example, if you have, let's see, if you want to display in your body, let's say, is it you? So this is an example of a bad style, because the tags cannot. One tag has to encapsulate another tag. They can't be overlapped. But in this case, the U underscore tag is here, but the I italicized tag is here. So this would be one example of a bad style. Another one would be, I guess, indentation. So if body is indented here, but at the bottom the close tag is lined up against, I guess, the rest of the body, that's another example of a bad style. Yes.
Would the validator have found the first issue you just mentioned? The HTML validator?
I think so. I think the validator will find this error if it's there. But indentation and the overall look of the page won't. Yeah.
There's actually a separate validator for CSS on that W3C page.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't discover that till later, and my CSS did not come out as. But he just said to validate the HTML. So for Project Zero, it doesn't matter whether or not.
We won't look at the CSS page, so you'll be fine. Yeah. Last question.
Another question I have is under the lib and etc. I tried to store some files there and tried to access them, and it didn't seem to work, even though I used like change mod 466
under
on the file.
libs.
Oh,
Okay.
So sorry, normally under the root directory you would go under 0 and then HTML. Instead of HTML as a directory, there was also lib and etc.
Yeah.
And if I stored like pictures in there and tried to access them through the HTML file, it didn't seem to work.
You have to use that recursive recursive thing on the change node so that you're subdirected?
Okay, let me answer that short question. So the short, easy question is you do have to recursively chmod the files. So you can't just chmod like the folder itself, but
Yeah.
not the subfolders. I think you did chmod everything, right?
No, I did each file.
Yeah.
Like I did it like almost like a test. I put in like a test file. Because I knew that under the HTML folder it would work, but under like lib. And then I put a file in there and then changed mod that particular file and then tried to access it. And it didn't seem to work. And I thought it might be like a directory structured thing, but
It might be. I guess I can take a look at it and then, or you can send the email to Dan and David because they created everything. So you can.
Would there be anything on the server side that might be able to prevent that or?
You
Anything.
couldn't see it when you looked on the browser? It wasn't showing up, but you wanted something to?
On the browser, no. It wouldn't show up. Like it would, like how you will reference a link and then you'll have it like name something. If it doesn't come up, that name would just come up.
My impression was that only that HTML folder was gonna be viewable. But maybe
Yeah,
that's-
because
I think-
that's the root, and you're trying to display something that's above or to the side of the root. I don't think they would be able to see anything from the browser.
Because the root was linked directly to the HTML. I was just wondering
Yeah.
if I could actually change that as a user.
No, so I think everything that can be accessed by the user will be under the HTML folder.
Yeah.
Anything before that, I don't think you can.
Yeah, no, I got that part. I was
Uh-huh.
wondering if there's any way as a user to change that, or is it something that?
No, it's not something that the
I thought
user.
that was in the Apache config too,
change.
didn't they deny permissions to other directories other than that one there?
Sorry, I missed your question. I was
No,
worried about the time.
Apache server was set up, permission-wise for directories, so that
Uh-huh.
only that one could be used.
Yeah, I think it's a Apache server thing. Okay.
I have one more question.
Okay.
The style, the
Yeah.
document style,
Uh-huh.
that has to go at the very top of the
Yeah.
document. Was there only one style we were supposed to use? Because there's a reference to a number of them here and in the book.
So for the style of the pages, you can just find a source code that David used in class and just copy that.
Okay, so
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, and that'll be the end of the section. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.